let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's deal with it. This is a broken bone in our country. And in order for it to heal properly, it has to be reset. And to me, that resetting is truth. I'm not blaming whoever for whatever atrocities happen to people that look like me or in my family, but I need you to be able to accept and admit that these things did actually happen.
Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to Unbroken Chain. I'm so glad you're here hanging again. I have a conversation from Birmingham, Alabama this week, and I just want to say how much I've been loving living here this winter. As I say in this conversation, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, which is a very wonderful, magical place, but I had definitely a stereotypical view of the South that was probably not the most generous. And as I've gotten to know the South over the last several years of making films down here, and now really having lived here for almost a year in various states, I have to say that because there is in particular so much suffering, historical and contemporary, slavery, genocide of the Native Americans, Jim Crow laws, continued oppression of minority groups. Because all of that has gone down on this land, I mean, let's be honest, it's gone down anywhere that colonizers have touched land in North America, but specifically because so much blood has been shed in the South, there's a lot of healing to be done here. And holy cow, is this week's guest like such an incredible blast of like transformation and change and truly devotion to that work. This is T. Marie King, who pretty much as soon as I got to Birmingham, several people were like, this woman you must talk to. And yeah, I mean, she is a powerhouse, a total badass. And as you'll hear very quickly in this conversation, like she's really given her life over to being a community organizer and an activist and an educator in a way that I think maybe even surprised her, but like that's what happens when the universe calls you to be in service. And it is just so humbling to be around somebody that has answered that call in such a complete way. It's really challenging work, and I really appreciate that she's honest about that, because I think some of us can have this idea that like when we look back on historical leaders and movers and shakers who we credit with like particular movements, be it the civil rights movement or environmental movements, those people are still humans. And I think sometimes we forget that when we lionize people and we boil down decades of work by many real people, real humans, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers. We put that on the shoulders of one kind of hero figure. And in reality, these times, which are so fraught and so fragile, are calling on all of us to recognize that God, that hero inside of all of us. Like we all have those qualities, and if we choose to devote our life to nurturing them, to growing, to being uncomfortable, to stepping into positions that we don't feel like we're ready to do, but nobody else is doing, like that's on all of us. And this conversation is a really potent reminder that the work that needs to be done in the world is right here. It's in this very moment, and it starts with our own communication with ourselves inside our own heads. And that's pretty wild, but I think it's something that we all need to prioritize and be really proactive about. Before I let her just take this away, I want to tell this story that T. Marie told that I think really exemplifies what an incredible person she is. She was working with a group of, I want to say educators or people involved in education, a lot of different factions that were all fighting for the same resources. And she said that she arranged a screening event and invited them all. And when they got there together, it was a surprise that they had all been invited. And she was like, I'm sorry guys, but look, y'all need to talk to each other. And they ended up having like this 3-hour discussion, and people that had never been in the same room together were forced to face communicate. And I was just so struck that like that disconnection happens all the time in the world. All these different factions that feel like they're enemies and are never actually in dialogue with each other. And it's so crazy that it takes someone like T. Marie, a human woman that fucking cares about her community, to force people to have conversations. We're so confrontation averse and so scared of each other. And really, it's that resistance that is so toxic. That's where the storytelling can grow. And that's where the fear gets its lifeblood. Once we actually confront things that are hard, then we can cry, we can rage about it, we can have feelings about it, we can ask for help if we need. But if we resist ever going into the hard stuff, we're just paralyzed in the realm of thoughts and ghosts and projections. And it's really wild that T. Marie has been making that happen in such a real way. And I want to encourage all of you to bring so much love for yourself into this conversation and look for the parts of you that are being called forward as a leader by her example, by her compassion, by her growth. I really believe that each of us comes here with divine gifts, and these times are the times when we really take stock of that. What is the worth of this life and these gifts, and how do we honor them? So I'm really glad you're here. This is really exciting work, and I'm really excited to see what unfolds in your world as some of her magic bubbles through you. All right, T. Marie King, enjoy. So I'm curious how you ended up in this line of work.
Ironically, I tell people I fell into it. Like, I really feel like I did. My background is actually film and video production.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was not doing this, was not checking for helping people. Like, that was not on my radar. And I was living in Atlanta and ended up getting sick and had to move back home. And so my thing was, I'm going to be at home, work, save me some money, and I'm moving to either New York or California. It's one of the two. So that was my plan. And that was 2008 also. So it has been a while. But I started working for a local nonprofit, and I think after being there maybe a year or two, I got asked to participate in the commemorative Selma to Montgomery march. And it was a very specific march where it was the 50th anniversary, but it was set up by the National Park Service. And so they were very intentional in each day we did as close to what the marchers did. We walked the distance they walked that day. We stopped in the places they stopped in.
Wow.
So it was very intentional, and it was only 300 people. And so that number was specific because only 300 people could do the actual march. That's all that Dr. King could get a permit for. So if you watch like Eyes on the Prize and stuff like that during February, you see thousands of people at Brown Chapel, and then you see thousands of people at the Capitol at the end of the week. And both of those are true, but in actual marching, it was only 300.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were learning all kind of like tidbits and stuff like that. Like the first night they had spaghetti when they stopped at the David Hall farm to rest. Some of it was things from like real deep kind of like take these in moments to like they were eating spaghetti, and you know, women brought their rollers with them, you know, so it was things like that it was like it really made those folks human. Because I think sometimes we see those videos and they almost become like immortal, and they don't seem like real people anymore because of the context we talk about them. But to hear that, you know, this woman has her, you know, rollers in her pocket and, and she had spaghetti, they all had spaghetti that night, it's like, okay, these are real folks, you know, because I too have rolled my hair and I've eaten spaghetti before, you know, so it kind of that connection. But it was like day 3 of the march, we were talking about 4 key people. And one of those people was Viola Liuzzo. And a lot of people don't know her story, but she came from Detroit, mother of 5, married, and she heard Dr. King's appeal of we need people to come to Selma and help us out. And she responded. She, you know, she left her kids. Her husband came down to help out. She helped out with logistics, and she ended up losing her life. She was killed after the march was over. She was helping transport people back and forth. And so hearing those types of stories in a more personal context for people who were actually there, it was like, what am I really doing? You know, it's like, what am I doing that can be on the level of impactful with what these folks did 50 years ago. And so I kind of wrestled with it for like the next year and a half, because I'm like, I really want to do film and video production. I got all these ideas. But then I had this pulling over here, and I kind of had that realization that my purpose and passion weren't the same thing. And once I kind of dealt with that, which took a minute, I said, well, if my purpose is to truly help people see each other differently, then that's what I'm going to commit to. And so around end of 2016, that's what I committed to. And I started doing talks about race and holding race panels. And it just kind of grew from there.
Wow. That gives me goosebumps. I really love the way that you're speaking about these people that we uplift as idols almost, because it really is like the best teachers are showing us that we have that capability in ourselves.
Absolutely.
I feel like you answered that call.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a lot. It's not an easy burden, but I would say it's a happy burden in the sense that I'm happy to respond to it. And if that's what, my role is in this world, then, so be it, know. And hopefully the film stuff will come back around eventually.
Yeah. Well, if you have a message to share, I mean, that's a way to amplify it through media.
Yeah. So, we'll see. Who knows what the future holds.
Yeah. So what does your day-to-day look like of the kind of work that you're doing? Like, how is the activism that you're doing manifested?
The cool thing is that no day is the same. So, I mean, even this week, today I'm here with you. Wednesday, I was with about 30 4th and 5th graders.
Really?
From a local elementary school that's not diverse. But we went to one of the local Jewish temples for them to learn about a different faith, and that you may meet people that worship or believe differently than you. Now, that doesn't mean you treat them different, but that being able to understand and be compassionate. So I've been working with this group since last year. We went to the Civil Rights Institute. We visited the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama for them to learn about the issues that Hispanic residents in Alabama and across the nation are dealing with, from, undocumented status to dealing with ICE. We talked about things down at the border. Like, we did not sugarcoat it because they were elementary age kids. But what was so cool was they catch stuff. We think these kids are not listening because they're so young, but they asked a lot of amazing questions. So anything from that to speaking at a college, speaking at a high school, doing training for a board of directors around bias and awareness. So my days can easily look different, but I meet so many people, and that's what I really enjoy, is being able to connect with a lot of people. It gives me the flexibility to kind of travel also, which I love. So my days are never the same.
It's an adventure.
Yeah, it really is.
Is there one kind of key theme or question that you feel like you're working on, that you have a mission toward?
I think my biggest thing is trying to help people, and I say it in all my workshops, help people be a custodian of the way they think.
Ooh.
I always say that because I think we could deal with a lot of harmful things that happen in society if people just check the way they thought about people. And I think sometimes people think there's this deeper dive that we have to do. And it's like, no, why do you think that about that person? Or you saw this on the news and you made whatever comment. Why was that comment necessary? Where did that come from?
Wow.
So I think if we could just be honest about, I don't understand this group, but then let's work to understand them. You don't have to agree. And I think we misinterpret agreement, for acceptance. And it's like, I don't necessarily need your agreement, but if you can hear me, that maybe how I grew up from you is totally different, but that doesn't mean that my experience is less valid. So I really try to push people on, how they think. Yeah. So
does acceptance mean then kind of like creating a spaciousness for other people to be different?
Yeah. I tell people, I was like, we ain't got to be BFFs. We don't have to hang out. But if you can say that you see me and you understand that, man, you may have gone through some things that I have no knowledge of, or I'm not dealing with oppression in that way. So I'm sorry, how can I be an ally to help in that manner? I don't expect men to understand what it's like to be a woman. I'm not expecting that. But for you to be able to empathize that we may deal with things differently than what you all actually have to deal with, you know. So it's that acceptance of, yeah, you're different from me, and that's okay. Yeah.
Do you see patterns in the way that people think, or even just people's relationship to their own thoughts?
I normally see people get so defensive because it's that protection of, you know, what you've been taught, what you've caught, you know, and what you have transcended into believe. These are my own beliefs, you know. So we have the stuff we get from our folks and our family, our friends. We have the stuff we pick up in the media. We have our own experiences. And through those things, we define who we are. You know, whether it's you had a bad experience here and it's like, well, I'm not going to participate in things of that nature. You know, so we create our own space and how we want our lives to be governed as we get older. And so it's like, so if you can do that, then I should be able to do the same thing. And the acceptance of respecting that I'm different and it's okay. And so that was one of the things with the kids is, you know, you don't have to be Black to understand that Black people in this country have gone through some horrific things. You don't have to be Hispanic, you know, or Latina to understand that some of the things that they're dealing with right now is very atrocious and horrible, you know, but you can look and say, you know, that's not right. But what role can I play? Is there a role that I can play to help shift and change that? But I think normally I see people jump to defensiveness. And then we have to kind of work through that. And a lot of times that's identifying your own biases and seeing where did that come from and working through it. You know, so I don't expect it to be overnight, but just getting people to the place of being willing to have that conversation and do the deeper dive. Yeah.
When you say defensiveness, that makes me think of somebody that like doesn't have even like a firm enough grip on what they do value and believe, that they feel like they have to defend it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like a position of weakness or like lack of investigation, I guess.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. And it normally shows in people's arguments because they start trying to defend and it's like, okay, that's not actually factual, you know, because they'll have a tendency to throw things out. And I'm like, we're in the ballpark. Let me get you to the mound because that's not actually true. And when I do workshops, I try to be sensitive to one, people being willing and open, because anytime you're talking about bias and racism and things like that, you know, that's a little touchy subject for people sometimes. And to open yourself up amongst a group, you know, because I work with anybody from church groups to, you know, staffs. So people that you may work alongside have ideas that you have no clue that they have. So when we start kind of like picking through some things, you might find out that, you know, Johnny feels XYZ way about women and you had no clue. And then they don't want to really reveal all of that. And so a lot of times I end up getting like either, can I email you a question I have, or somebody will pull me to the side and it's like, no, let's explore that. You know, where did that come from? And usually what I've seen is that a lot of times it's rooted in two areas, fear and harm. So either somebody has been harmed in some kind of way by somebody that represents that group, or they have fear due to lack of exposure and interaction with that different group.
And it's just become like a general rule.
Yeah. So it's almost like kind of like that out of sight, out of mind, or this is what I've seen, this is what I feel I know to be true. And it's like, well, that may not actually be accurate. You know, so it's getting people to push past those things to be open enough to see that they actually could be wrong, but not wrong in the way of we're demeaning you for being wrong, but this is an opportunity and a doorway to say, okay, I was wrong on that. Now, how can I do something different? I'll give you an example. I was working with a young professionals group and it was predominantly white. I want to say it might have been 2 or 3 Black people in there besides the 2 I brought with me and myself. And we were talking about inclusion, but inclusion on a personal level. I don't think companies and folks can really talk about their space of worship, work, or whatever being diverse and inclusive if your own life is not inclusive. And so I said, well, you know, we got to work to build, you know, make our lives inclusive, blah, blah, blah. And this guy said, where am I supposed to meet Black folks? He said, I can easily go all week and not see a Black person. And this is in metropolitan Birmingham. And I said, how is that possible? Like, seriously. And he was like, it's easy. He said, I work in an all-male corporate law firm. He said, everybody there is white. He said, all of our clients are white. I said, okay, that's one. He said, I live in an all-white neighborhood. It's gated. I said, okay. I said, you have no people of color in the community? He was like, none. He said, and third, he said, I go to an all-white church. Well, this is the South. I believe that. And you don't even have to explain that one. And he said, so where am I supposed to build relationships with black people? And I said, well, this is the South. I said, do you like football? Because football seems to be the great equalizer for some people. And he was like, I do. I said, my challenge to you, next time a game comes around, instead of watching it at home or with your buddies, go to a bar and find a black guy with your team's shirt on and buy him a beer. I said, you got at least 4 hours of material to talk about watching the game. I said, and I feel like y'all will be able to connect on some type of level. I said, now, if it completely backfired, I was like, my bad. I'm just trying to give you ideas. So some time went by, and he finally, sent me an email, and he was like, hey, can I give you a call? I was like, yeah. I was like, oh, Lord, this probably went so wrong. And he said, hey, I just want to tell you, I did what you said. Wow. I said, okay. I said, well, how did it go? He said, it actually went good. He said, me and the guy I met, he said, we both have boys the same age. And they ended up taking them to, it was like this dinosaur exhibit at the BJCC. And he took them, they both took their boys. They had like a father-son kind of day out. And he said, I get it. I get it. And I was like, that's all I was asking. It's just to try. And I know it can seem like a lot when you're not used to interacting with people that are different from you, but we have to take a step somewhere.
That makes me so emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the idea too that it's like worthwhile, not even worthwhile, but it's vital to like go out of your way to build those kind of relationships is so foundational.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to take work, and I think that's what we probably shy away from in society is that getting out of our comfort zone to actually do the work. And it's like, but in order for us to get where we say we want to be, and not even just what our nation says or what we say about the global community, but just to be in community, we have to get out of our comfort zone. Yeah.
I think about that a lot because I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Okay. And for a long time, I think I had a pretty cartoonish, stereotypical idea about the South and being like, oh, there are a bunch of racists down there. But the fact of the matter is, like, Portland is very white. It's very homogenous. And I don't think we actually, like, dealt with race really very much at all. And it's like you have to be in community with people. Like you have to, just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean that you know how to deal. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's people, and sometimes that fear surfaces as, wait a minute, I didn't know this existed. And so now you're being confronted with, how did I not know that? Yeah. When I did the march from Selma to Montgomery, on one day, I met this one guy and we just, randomly talking for a couple of miles as we were walking. And I said, well, what brought you to, participate in this march? And he was like, he probably was maybe 56, 57. He said, earlier this year, I just found out or learned about Emmett Till. Whoa.
And so I looked at him and I was like, what? I said, I get it. I said, I'm from the South and we're in the South. I said, but where are you from? Grew up in Vegas, military, was in the military himself. And he said he was working on his PhD. It was around STEM, but he had to take an ethics course. And he was like, are y'all serious? But he couldn't defend his dissertation without the ethics course. So they signed him up. He gets this particular teacher. And he said the first thing she said in class was, we're going to talk about Emmett Till and what his death meant to the movement. So he said he raised his hand and was like, who's Emmett Till? He said it was like all the eyes was looking at him. He said everybody looked at him and was like, what are you talking about? And he said the teacher said, by the end of this class, you will never forget who Emmett Till was. He said he went through and he was just floored that he had never heard of Emmett Till. So he said he's calling his kids who were actually in college at the time. He was like, do y'all know who Emmett Till is? Have you heard the name? And they were like, yeah, Dad. Like, where have you been? And he was like, but how did I grow up and not know it? So he actually decided to go back, changed his entire dissertation to focus on how we are teaching history
Whoa.
in school. So he said, when I heard about this opportunity, I just had to come do it. And so just how different people come to realization, but you have to be open, to be willing to hear and to learn something that, he had went all the 57 years.
Wow.
Or so, and had never heard that name.
Wow.
So, we get to it sometimes different times, some people sooner than others. But the fact that you get here, and if you're willing to do the work, I think we can truly work to create community. I really do.
That makes me want to kind of dig into that education piece, because I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was like, he's Black, and he was like, my history, it's like slavery or civil rights, and it's boiled down to just that.
Yeah.
What are you seeing like with education now, especially working with like elementary school kids? Like, are there functional models?
It seems like it's the same. Well, now we have Obama. So it was
right.
slavery, civil rights, and then here comes Obama. We're good. Like, everybody's happy. And it's like, no, not so much. What I am seeing is that I think you have some real great teachers out there. I really think we have a lot of amazing teachers. They just don't always have the resources. And then the books are not as accurate and up to date as they need to be. And that's a whole nother conversation of who controls, textbooks and who writes them. But I think teachers want to truly explore. It's just what they have the resources or they feel they have the freedom to do. But I always throw it back at parents and say, it's not the teacher's responsibility to teach your child everything. And if you see gaps, if you notice there are gaps, what can you do to fill them? So I really appreciate this mother who I became friends with, who were like, my kids is in a school that is not diverse. Help me figure out how to make this diverse, or at least, give them experiences. I said, well, we can't bus Black kids into the school, so let's just take them around and expose them. And so out of this became, we're going to go around and meet different people so that they can be exposed, but still teaching them that. But you want your life to reflect this also. But then I challenge the parents where I'm like, okay, don't let this just be it. Your child should be seeing that more in your life, who they're interacting with, putting them in places to interact with people that are different. So I do think there's a role that the schools can play. And I think that takes us as a local and city and statewide community to say, there's gaps in our textbooks. They need to be filled, and we need to change that. And I think we as a community need to really push back on our elected officials to change that. But I also think, parents also need to shoulder that responsibility of making sure that their kids are exposed to good, the bad, the ugly, but being able to have a full picture so they know, you are blessed. This is how you grew up, or these are the things you're able to access. Some people are not that fortunate. And so what can we do to lessen that burden? Or what can we do to give back? I think people should take their kids to homeless shelters and teach them how to give back. I think there's creative ways that families can incorporate what's going on in society with how it hits them. Because a lot of times we see issues and it's like, oh, that's there over there. That's not here. But it's like we need to bring those things home so those things don't happen where we live. Yeah.
I hear you speaking basically to so much segregation still. Like, it seems like it's possible to live out these very different lives, but, in proximity, like in a city like this.
Yeah.
I guess this is a really big question, but could you speak a little bit to sort of how that's playing out, like in 2020 still, and like what needs to be done?
There's a part of me that's like, you know what, let's all just get on a paintball field and just fight it out and everybody get their aggression out and then let's figure out how to move forward.
Sounds cathartic.
So, very cathartic. You get your aggression out. You might get hit a little bit, but hey, I was just mad about this that happened, so you just don't have to be in the way. But then there's a piece of me that feels like there's some deep listening and conversations that need to take place. When I go to schools, I'm like, y'all need a course on listening. Like, people do not listen. When you can have folks saying, this is what we're missing, this is what we need. We live in a food desert. We need a grocery store. And people to think, oh, no, you really don't need that. What you really need is this. I don't understand why people think that the folks in the community that are going through the issues or challenges can't solve their own problems. Usually it's a lack of resources, and exposure to opportunities. So what if we just brought the resources there and then let them fix it themselves? So I think, I really think deep listening is missing, but I think you have to be in a place for that. Like, I think you almost have to be prepared to listen, because you're going to hear things that you may not agree with, that you may not believe because you haven't seen it. And I think because we're afraid to do that, we continue to segment or segregate ourselves off. And that segregation may not always be racially. It could be mindset.
What do you mean?
So if you feel that teenagers are impulsive and make dumb decisions and they're not safe to be around, so what you do is you find other people that feel that same way. And so you become an echo chamber. And so it's like, did you see what they did? I said, did you see that on the news? They doing it again. That's how they act. And so we just refuel those mindsets. And then we have people that become that choir, behind us that say, you're absolutely right. I saw them do such and such before. And we do that with all different types of groups. So when we see them, we're already making judgment calls, And so I always say our brains have supportive data, So if we look at somebody and be like, thug, our brain starts filing through to see what supportive data supports me saying they're a thug. Oh, he has a hoodie on, baggy clothes. He's listening to that loud music. All these things that go with thug. And it's like, that could be the nicest person in the world. That's just how they choose to dress. And I think I'm always sensitive to the baggy clothes wearing because I'm a teenager from the 90s. That's all we wore was baggy clothes, loud colored clothes. And was I a thug? Absolutely not. Were my friends thugs? No. Did I know some thugs? Yeah. And they usually sometimes didn't even dress like that. But it's also understanding what led to that. What things does this person not have access to in their community? What may they be learning from other people around them? Your role models may be this. This may be the only role model they know. And I think sometimes we forget that people may lack things that we're not even aware that our celebration of what we've had may be triggering. So example, with the unfortunate and untimely passing of Kobe Bryant, past couple of days, people have been hashtagging girl's dad, girl dad, and all of that. And as somebody who grew up without their father being in their life, it personally didn't bother me. I thought it was beautiful to see all my friends doing these posts with their daughters. I was like, this is amazing. But I know everybody didn't have that upbringing, and that may be difficult for people to see. So what I put on Facebook was basically a shout out to all the girls whose fathers weren't mature enough or even available enough to be a girl's dad, that you still matter. And I had so many people just liking it and saying, thank you for saying that, because I was feeling very triggered. And so sometimes we do things not even to harm people, but sometimes our behaviors can be harmful. But it's being able to say or catch it and say, okay, let me be conscious about that. But that doesn't mean that you can't celebrate. It's just almost, it's not even balance. I think sometimes it's finding harmony in how we interact with each other. Yeah.
So how should we proceed as individuals in that context? Like if I want to celebrate being a girl dad, like how do I also create space for people that didn't have that privilege?
I think sometimes it could be something as small in how it's worded. Like, hey, I'm a girl's dad. I love my daughters and blah, blah, blah. And to the girls who don't have a dad, you know what I'm saying? Like sending that kind of love of almost giving that reassurance to that person who's going to read it, that's on your friend list, that you have no clue that their father wasn't there for them. But they're still there. They're still a part of your community. But being open and probably aware. And that takes a lot of work on our part to have that level of awareness. Right. And then some people's like, come on, T. Marie. Like, I got to think about everything. And I get it. You're going to miss stuff. But if you do think of it, at least try to be intentional in creating that space. As somebody, like I said, who grew up without their father, I'm always very intentional around Father's Day. Like for those who are not celebrating today, know that you are loved by others. And remember, there's probably a man in your life who really cares about you. Same thing with Mother's Day, or anything, but just knowing and recognizing that it may be people who didn't have, what we may have shared and creating that space, even if it's on social media, for people to feel welcomed and a part of the conversation. I'm a person that likes handwritten notes. And so sometimes if I hear that somebody has lost a parent or something major has happened, and I know that anniversary or that holiday that we all celebrate is coming up, I try to send them something or send them a text to let them know, hey, I'm thinking about you today. We ain't got to talk about it. We ain't got to go into no deep dive. I don't have to send you a prayer or anything like that. But I think sometimes just that, hey, I'm thinking about you today, I think goes a long way with people. Yeah.
Just letting them know that they've been seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people feel so unseen. We have a lot of people in this world. A lot of opinionated people in this world, and then a lot of people that get closed out due to the level of the volume of those opinions, washing them out. So how do we create that space for them to be seen globally, nationally, but sometimes even within our own friend groups? Are we creating that space for everybody to participate at the level that they're comfortable? Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, because I think so often, I'll just speak for myself, like it's easy for me to feel frustrated and resentful of like policies and policymakers, but it's like there are things that we can do on an individual level to like create the kind of community that will actually change that. Because like, I get it. It's overwhelming to be like, oh, take down the patriarchy.
Right.
Take down capitalism. Like, what does that actually look like?
Right.
But I feel like so much of what you're speaking to is that it's actually like inside our own heads.
Absolutely. And it's being willing to invest time. I was speaking to a group earlier this month, and this lady said, you seem to be very successful at getting at certain tables. Like, what is your advice to me? And I'm trying to get into these spaces. I said, you need to be patient. And I mean, not patient and let me sit on the sideline and wait. I said, but I really take time and invest in relationships, especially if it's somebody in a key relationship that I know you have the power to move the needle.
Yeah.
Oh, I will get to know you and we will hang out and I'll take you to lunch and we won't even talk about whatever it is that I have an issue that I want you to change. We won't even focus on that. I have spent up to a year almost kind of courting somebody because I need you to see me and who I am. So when you see somebody that looks like me, you kind of refer back to me and be like, okay, well, T. Marie was, okay, well, maybe they're not bad because, so I always tell people it's difficult to hate what you know. And if we take the time to get to know one another, then it's hard to say, well, all Black people are like, all women are like, all Hispanic people. Well, that's not true anymore because now you know this person and they shifted your perspective because how you feel about them. It's okay, well, now let's take that a step further. So what you're doing here is hurting people that looks like me. So can we have a conversation about things that can change? But I think also the public has to be open and honest that we're talking about systems that have been established for years. And we always want that quick, light switch, turn it off, turn it on, change it. And it's like, it doesn't happen that quick, unfortunately. So what can be changed now? What can be shifted now? And let's focus on them smaller wins, because eventually they all add up. And then before you know it, we're getting a law changed or we're getting somebody that don't need to be in office out of office. But that comes with doing that work and being patient and putting the time in.
So then that makes me want to ask, like, you've stepped into this work, which is incredible and such a act of devotion with your life. Is it the responsibility of people that are being oppressed to teach their oppressors what's going on? Is that an unfair burden to ask?
Yes, it is. But I get it in me being in a place where I say, I don't have a problem with the questions. Come ask me. I'll talk to you about what you think about this, about Black people, or, why do Black people do this? I don't have a problem doing that personally because I have placed myself in this work. Don't go find random Black person
right.
and be like, hey, I need to know X, Y, Z. Don't do that. You might get cussed out. But if you've had the time to build relationship with people, I think for the most part, people are willing to say, well, let me help you understand XYZ. But then at some point in time, you got to do your own work and do your own research and find those other people like me that can say, yeah, go to this, go check this conference out, go hear this person speak. But it is unfair to expect those who are experiencing oppression or have been oppressed to kind of educate you, because that in turn become harmful for them. Because now I got to relive maybe some hard things in order for you to be enlightened. And that's extremely unfair.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you that in reference to the Emmett Till thing too, a little bit, in the sense that, like, I think it's important for, let's just say, like, in the context of race, for white people to see, like, that a lot of black people are being killed by police. Like, if you don't experience that in your life, you need to at least see it in whatever media you're consuming. Yeah. But also that's, again, it's like putting out these stories of, like, harm to black people that I imagine are, like, pretty triggering to people who might be vulnerable to that. Like, how do we navigate that?
And I think it's creating that space for people who are black that want to participate, you know, and normally these are kind of educators or organizers or activists. I wouldn't ask somebody who's like a postal worker, come in and be a part of this company. No. I'm not going to put you in that position. But I think it's people within the community that can help kind of shoulder that. That doesn't mean that we don't get triggered because I remember when They See Us came out, which Ava DuVernay, I thought, did an amazing job. And it's a very hard and difficult watch. And I'm a big news junkie follower. Like, it's big stories is what I'll kind of get sucked into. And I told everybody, my sister was watching, she said, oh my gosh, she said, this is so triggering, you know. And I said, you know what was more triggering for me than When They See Us was watching the Dateline footage on what actually happened. And so this was like all the news coverage, what people were saying, the ad that Donald Trump took out and put in the paper in New York. And I mean, sitting there for 2 hours watching that made me more angry than actually watching the story, because this is what people were actually saying on the street. And these were teenagers. And they look like little boys. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, how can you look at this child and think monster? Something is wrong. There's something off. And so I love setting up movie screenings where I can say, I know this is a hard watch, and I'll put that disclaimer out there. This is hard. This is triggering. You go get mad, but if you're willing to stick through it so we can have a conversation about it, please come and watch this with me. You know, and I think some of us have the ability to, or I would say graced with the ability to go through and watch things like that. Like, I talk about a lot of hard topics over and over and over again. And I have friends that are like, I could not do that. But I know how to separate from it. You know, when we're working. And then sometimes I just want to watch Riverdale.
Amen. Yeah.
But you have to know when to turn it off and on. And I do. I have my non-negotiables. I have my time when this is me time or this is me and family. I've been out with friends and somebody's like, well, hey, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know what? Tonight I'm not talking about that. And so some of that is kind of that self-preservation and also taking care of yourself. But I do think there's strength in saying we have to tell these stories. I'm a fan of, if we go tell it, we have to tell it all. Let's just be completely open and honest. So when I see biopics or stories that are supposed to be fact-based, I don't want the Hollywood doctored up version. I want it as raw as it can be of how it was experienced. So then you're not saying, well, it wasn't that bad, because when I saw that movie, it didn't seem bad. You know, so now you're playing with perception and reality, you know, for Hollywood. And I'm like, no, show it all, which is why I'm kind of a fan of documentaries, because they usually, for the most part, stick to the truth. But it's like, no, let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's deal with it. This is a broken bone in our country. And in order for it to heal properly, it has to be reset. And to me, that resetting is truth. You know, we have to lead with truth. And I'm not blaming whoever for whatever atrocities happen to people that look like me or in my family, but I need you to be able to accept and admit that these things did actually happen. And I think we're unfortunately in a time in society where people are playing around with what's real and what's fake. And I think we have to work together as, whether it's journalists, whether it's writers, whether it's organizers, activists, educators, podcasters, artists, we have to work together to make sure that we are still sticking with truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to something that I've been feeling too, which is I've heard people kind of describe the administration that we have right now. If there is a silver lining, it's like that it's bringing things to the surface and causing people to talk about things. And maybe people that do have pretty deep biases and prejudices, like it's out on the surface now, for better or for worse. Do you feel like that's productive or that's happening?
Is it productive? Probably not.
Sure.
I'd rather know who my local racist is. Like I feel safer knowing that you're not smiling in front of my face and plotting on me behind my back, and I'm thinking we're good and we're technically not. So for me, I think it's like I know where you stand, and I can actually work with that. If I know where you stand. But it's when people hide behind these other feelings and things, it's like having that creeper person that pretends like I'm here for the community and I'm supportive, but they're secretly plotting to do harm. And I feel like that's kind of where we've been, where it's like we're just going along and we're just happy and everything's great. But it's like when this happened, it's like people felt free for all that they could say whatever. And I remember seeing folk like, I unfriended this person and I blocked this one. And I'm like, but you didn't know they was like that. Right. And like, what happened? But then I had to think, well, that person wasn't revealing that part of themselves, which goes back to the honesty. We weren't truly being honest. But if you stand up and say, you know what, T. Marie, I don't like this and I don't like that, cool. I had a guy tell me one time at a talk I did, he said, I never thought a little colored girl can teach me anything. Now, the lady that was standing next to me was like, you gonna let him call you a colored girl? And I was like, I said, well, what did you learn? And so he started naming things that he, heard during the talk that night. And I said, well, can I give you some suggestions? And he was like, yeah. I said, well, I think these 2 books are some books that you probably should, check out if you get the time, to read. And he said, you know what? I'll do that. And so as me and the lady are walking away, she was like, I'm so sorry that he said that. I said, look, sometimes it's deciding which hill you want to die on. I said, should he have called me a little colored girl? No. If this was me 5 years ago, this could have went a totally different way. I said, but the fact that he was able to tell me things that he heard that stuck out to him, I saw that as an opportunity to educate him just a little bit more. Now, he has to do the rest of the work. He has to actually go get the books or have more deeper conversations, and he may never do that. I said, but the fact that he heard something that jarred something, to me, that's a win. And I think sometimes we get caught up on small things that we miss the bigger picture. Should have called me colored girl? No, but then I knew where we were, and I wasn't in a part of the state that was probably the most accepting of people that look like me. But he thought he was being respectful. Now, we can work through some of that if you're willing. But I think sometimes we get distracted. And it's like, I got to fight this battle. And that wasn't a battle worth fighting. The fact that you actually showed up to a conversation on race when there's not even a lot of black people in your community, that's major. So to me, that's a win. But I think it goes back to leading with honesty. Like, let's be honest about who we are, what we think about people, what we've seen happen in our country. And if we don't want these things repeated, or if we don't want somebody else put at the bottom of the totem pole and we're oppressing, then what do we need to do to work together? But that starts with truth. Yeah.
I'm really floored by the work that you've done, like personally on yourself too, because you could have met that with anger, like righteous anger.
Yeah.
But I hear you like taking your ego out of the equation for like an educational opportunity, which is like, that's really deep work.
Let me tell you, my sister laughs at me. She's like, I'm not where you are. She tells me all the time. I said, sometimes I'm surprised on where I am. But I don't know if it's being in the moment, but I'm really concerned about if you feel that way, if you see me as colored or Negro, there's actually been some harm done to you. You know?
Can you speak about that?
So if you look at old lynching photographs, the thing that's so heartbreaking to me, outside of the lynching, is when I see people with their children on their shoulders at these lynchings.
Yeah.
So they may not be saying, we kill these people and hang them. They may not actually verbally be saying that, but you're showing me. So you're telling me this is okay. And so you're talking about little people who come in this world pure with no type of ought or issue with anybody. But I'm seeing, oh, this is okay. So regardless of whatever their mind believes or how they felt about their little friend around the corner, you're saying when he gets that big, this is all right. So you have been harmed because you've been taught a wrong way of how to interact and see people. And because that hasn't been dealt with or nothing has changed that, you become an adult that thinks it's okay to call you these names. Because that's what we've always said. I didn't mean it disrespectful. I put Mr. or Mrs. in front. And it's like, okay, well, thank you for that. But that's actually not cool. We don't say that anymore. But in their mind, and especially if their community hasn't shifted, they think that's okay. So for me, and maybe it's just where God has me right now in my life, my heart really goes out to people who say and do certain things, and it really makes me feel bad because you have definitely missed out on either some good relationships, and you've been done a disservice by those who raised you. When I look at these police killings or, this guy that killed Mike Brown, for you to say you didn't see a teenage boy, you saw a gorilla, that came from somewhere. And it's like, oh my gosh, who taught you that? Because that started somewhere, or, to have a Dylan Roof to go in a church and think, I have to do this. Well, that didn't just pop up in your mind at, 15, 16, 17-year old. That came from somewhere. And so I love to be able to go talk to little kids and teenager and college students because those minds are still forming, those opinions, they're still learning. And if I can impart anything that says, no, let's not look at our neighbor that way. Let's be respectful. Let's be compassionate. It's okay they're different. That is actually fine. You might learn something new. You might experience something that you didn't even know you would like, but you have to be open and welcoming. So I think, some people have been harmed, and throughout our country, I think kids have had it the worst because they catch these lessons of hate and meanness and distrust with no validity with it. So now I'm just going around disliking and hating you, not because of anything I've experienced or anything you did to me personally, because that's just what we do. And I think where we are in society is a reflection of a lot of poor lessons that people have caught.
Yeah, when you speak about the broken bone in America, which I love that image, can you articulate what you think that rift is that we have to really work on healing?
I really think it's honesty and acknowledgement. And I could be wrong, but what I hear from different groups, what I hear from Black people, what I hear from Hispanic people, what I hear from Indigenous people a lot of times is I want them to acknowledge what happened.
Yeah.
know? And it's like, well, that's happened so long ago. Let's move past it. And it's like, no. We can move past it when you acknowledge it. It's like if you're having an argument with somebody and he's like, I want you to acknowledge that what you said was wrong. And it's like, but no. I need you to acknowledge that you said X, Y, Z. And it's like once they say that, then it's like, okay, now I can start moving forward. But I think because people have dealt with the erasure of, you're talking about Indigenous people dealing with land being taken from them, being a genocide taking place. You're talking about Black people being enslaved, taken from their country, brought here, language, culture, all those things ripped from them. And you say, hey, we all good. We can sit together in restaurants. We cool. Let's just move forward. And it's like, no. I need you to acknowledge. And I think that's what that broken bone is, that honesty and that acknowledgement. You know, so people throw around reconciliation. There's reconciliation councils, there's groups trying to reconcile. And I really struggle with reconciliation, not because I don't want people to come together, but I don't think we can reconcile without honesty. Because to me, then you're just doing it for show. But if we're going to truly reconcile, I mean, normally what you reconcile a relationship. And the groups that need reconciliation weren't necessarily in good relations in the first place. So how can black and white people reconcile when our relationship was transactional and not on our side? You know, we were used as a commodity to work and to build the country and all of that. We weren't. I mean, our own Constitution says black people were 3/4 human. You know, so what are we reconciling? The fact that this is how we were seen? Well, we can't move forward until we agree these things happen. And other laws were piled on, you know, so you free us. All right, great. But now we got to deal with Jim Crow laws and black codes and redlining and now gerrymandering today. And it's like, you know, we can't move forward until we've truly dealt with what happened. So I think that it goes back to that honesty and that acknowledgement of we can move forward when you can say, you know what, we take responsibility, and not necessarily for these things. I know you're not the one that lynched my great uncle. I'm not blaming you for that. But for you to say, on behalf of, we apologize. You know, you'll see it with organizations that things happen, and this person wasn't the person that did it, but they said, because I represent the organization, I'm apologizing, and we're going to work to atone for it. And so I think we need to probably be looking more at what things can we atone for in our nation versus pushing people to reconcile.
Can you unpack that word atone? So
an atonement is almost like saying, I may not have done this. I may have benefited from the oppression of you. Even though I didn't set the system up that way, I still think it's wrong. And this is what I can do to help change that. You know, so I have a friend who, I think grandfather, he fought in the Confederate Army. High up there because there's a building at a school named after him. And so she had been working to like have his name removed. She was like, I want his name taken off the building, but the school was fighting back with, no, you know, we appreciate what he did and blah, blah, blah. And I asked her, I said, why are you fighting to have his name removed? And she's like, T. Marie, come on. You know why I'm fighting to have his name removed. I said, but what is it doing for you? And she said, he did this and I have that name and I want them to know I don't agree with what he did. I said, I got it. I said, now what if we leave his name, but there's a scholarship for students of color who attend this particular school who are in this program? I said, and so your atonement can be due to what my grandfather did to people that look like you. I have set up this foundation to help atone by helping you go to school, by alleviating some of that, you know, burden of the resources you have to come up with. And she was like, well, I never thought about it like that. I said, well, you don't have to do a scholarship. I said, but I think being honest about, I know what he did. I don't agree with it. But since the school doesn't want to take his name down, I'm going to force my way in, and this is how we're going to address it. But it gives you room, gives you that freedom to identify. I said, and then those may not be good ideas. Maybe you need to go talk to the kids that are actually in that program and say, what could help you? How can I be of service? You know, do you need connections? Do you need whatever? But I think sometimes looking at, we didn't create the situation. We weren't the ones that established the system. We didn't do these atrocities. But because I'm a descendant of somebody who did, one, I recognize they did do that. You can apologize for that, not on behalf of them, but the fact that you and people that look like you had to experience it. And I see that that is what happened. But also, this is what I want to do to make it better. And I think I won't say forget, but I think for whatever reason, it's like people are fearful to take that step. It's like we're missing action in our community now. And I think atonement is about action, like what can actually be done, what can be changed. And I think that's where that fear creeps back in, because you may have to step out from amongst your echo chamber. You may make a decision to help somebody that may cost you your job. And it's how much skin are you willing to put in the game? And that's what it comes down to. And a lot of people aren't ready to take that large of a step. But I think that's what we're missing in society, is people willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to sacrifice. I am. I know I'm going to catch it and people are going to be mad out of my network, but this is the right thing to do. And I think when we get more people willing to do that, and that's across all, the spectrums, color, whatever, sometimes you got to take a stand and say, you know what, this is not right. And I refuse to continue to be in this knowing this is not right. I worked for an organization one time where they were doing things that I did not agree with. And it got to the point where I was like, I feel like my integrity is being compromised by me continuing to work here. And so I just made the decision. I said, I'm willing to leave my job because I'm seeing you do things that don't line up with my values. And so I left that job. Had no job to go to at the time, but I took a huge leap because I was very concerned about, if I say I'm a person that believes in these things, but what I'm connected to does not emulate that, then somebody lying. Either I'm lying about what I said my values are, and so it's like being able to take those big steps that I think are necessary now.
We can't compartmentalize anymore.
Right.
Like, I spend 10 hours of my day giving my life force to something that I don't subscribe to. It's like, that doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely. You can't just put your head in the sand and I'm just here, I'm just working. And it's like, no, people are being harmed. People are being hurt, whoever they are. And for you to continue to be a part of it, for me, and I don't know what other people think, to me, I feel like you're co-signing on what's being done. And if our values are not in alignment, then somebody gonna have to make a move. And if you're not willing to make that move, then that means I have to take ownership. But then that takes courage, that takes courage to be able to say, I'm willing to make this step because I believe in it that much. Yeah.
Well, it makes you really vulnerable, but I feel like part of the reason why the check your privilege thing is feeling a little trite at this point. I think it's helpful. We needed to open that box and have that, but it's now what? You have privilege, now what?
Yeah.
And to actually cede your privilege is oh, that's what it feels like to not have privilege. Oh,
right.
Shoot,
Yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree. Yeah, we've talked about privilege till we blue in the face. And now it's like, okay, and you have privilege. I'm glad you realized that. I'm still dealing with this over here. So I think it's that thing of identifying what are the next steps. What do those things look like? Do we need to vote some folks out of office? Great. Where's the next meeting on how we're going to actually actively get this person out of office? I think we got to make leaps like that. Like I always say, I think women could really shift a lot of things, and I think the more diverse Congress looks, the more we can get things done. I'm for term limits. There's no reason why somebody should be a politician for 30, 40, 50 years. There's no reason. But we sit back and we allow them to stay in those seats, whether it's, I don't have time, I don't want to deal with it, my vote doesn't matter. Whatever your reasoning for not doing that, you're still co-signing because you're not actively doing anything to change it. Yeah, you may feel like your one vote doesn't matter, but I promise you, if you make loud enough noise, if your wheel makes enough noise in your car, you're going to be like, I need to stop and figure out what's going on. And I think if we start picking that back up and start making a lot of noise, I think we can really shift some things. Yeah.
Where are you focusing now in terms of Birmingham? Are there areas that you feel like need that all hands on deck energy?
I think the entire South needs it. That's number one. But I think there's so many rural communities that need empowerment that are not getting the attention. Birmingham gets attention, Montgomery, of course, because it's the capital. Huntsville, because of what's going on there. Tuscaloosa, because of the college and what's happening there. But I think there's rural communities and rural people that are experiencing so many other, whether it's environmental injustices or, whatever, that their voices are not being elevated. So I'm looking and tapping into some work of how can we hear those voices? What does that look like? And how can we uplift those voices? I think sometimes you have to be the voice for the voiceless until they're strong enough to be it for themselves. And I think that's what a lot of our rural communities need support in.
Lack of resources.
Lack of resources, lack of feeling you're powerful. But a lot of times it's resources where, they may not have, the funding they need for their schools, or their community may have been polluted due to a plant being there, but you don't have a hospital near. So are people just staying sick and not able to get the treatment that they need because the next hospital is like 2 or 3 towns over, and transportation is not very reliable there. So I think it's different, issues per community, but looking at it and saying, okay, these folks need help here, and we should be responding to. I always feel like, like the world is like a body, and I was a very adventurous kid, so I've had all types of scrapes and scratches and bones broken. But if you scratch your finger, all the blood starts rushing to that one spot to protect it from disease or anything else. And then it makes a scab to protect that space as it heals up. And I'm like, why aren't we doing that for communities? This community has been harmed in the environment because this plant was here and we allowed that plant to stay there. And now it has toxins in the water system, and it has toxins in the soil, and now people are developing cancer. Why aren't we all rushing to that? To say, y'all need to pay attention to this right here so that we can get them what they need and get them back healthy. And then when a scratch happens somewhere else, then we rush to that. So I know lofty utopian thinking, but I just feel like, we should be rushing to what's hurt to help uplift it, so that when they're strong, they can help us address the next issue. But
I suppose the answer is that it's not profitable to do that.
Yeah, it's not. It's not big business and activism. It's not. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. We need people to, it's almost like people feel like, well, you got to have some people who are like working class or whatever. Maybe, but people could still be living at a level that they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's livable.
Yeah.
People should be able to make a livable wage and they not have to be CEO of a company. They should be able to take care of their families and provide their families with what they need and not struggle. And there's definitely, as we see with all these tech startups and patents that people get on things, we are clearly not at a lack for money. Yeah. So the money's there. It's just how it's distributed.
And how wild is it that you have to say that, like in America, where the American dream is that we're all thriving and
right. And it's like, not so much. We all want that dream. Like this morning, I was over at City Hall as some Hispanic residents became citizens, and it was so beautiful to see that happening. And for whatever reason, you made the choice to come to this country. I don't think people make choices to leave their country lightly. So there's reasoning behind that. You see a better opportunity or want to provide better for your family. How can you not applaud that? That may be something we're not personally experiencing, of where we having to, do I leave here and go move here? And that's a whole nother country versus a state. But people are making that choice and they're risking it all to do that. We see what's happening at the border, and people knowing that I may not actually make it all the way there, but I'm going to try, because if I get there, I could possibly change the lives of my family. And I feel like if people are willing to do that, we have to meet them halfway. We should want to meet them halfway, and I think, again, fear and not want to get out of our comfort zone prevents us from being able to see people for who they are, for their true story, and what they're actually probably even bringing that's going to be enriching for all of us. But I think we have to definitely get out of our comfort zones and be willing to see our neighbor, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a process that people go through. Absolutely. Of Cool. We like systems. All right. Let's just make sure it's equitable. If you go create it, make it equitable. Make it easy. Don't make it break somebody's back trying to get it and where they're continuously being harmed. You know, and I think those are some of the conversations we could be having in some of our communities. They're not sexy conversations. They're not easy conversations. They're very hard. They're very emotional sometimes, but it's what people are dealing with, you know. And if we say we're that, you know, nation, you know, where you can have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, well, what does that really mean? Do we need to check what we're saying at the border? Because what type of life? Is it just a good life just for you? Liberty, who is liberated? Are we still binding people by the systems that we create, by the barriers and walls that we want to throw up? And to pursue happiness, can we just let people be? You know, so it's like those things we have, in my opinion, this is T. Marie speaking, but those are things that I'm like, we should wrestle with individually as a member of this country. For these things to be true, we have to make it equitable.
I feel like it'll make us all stronger too, because so much of what makes us fearful of, let's say, the immigrant coming in is this like lack of abundance, because we do see people struggling. We see people openly homeless, and it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that for my children.
Right.
And that fear keeps us like so isolated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's sad. We have a lot of work to do. Yeah. But I really believe if people individually will start kind of doing your thing, chipping away at the biases you have, you know, the ideas and thoughts that you may have about others, and really dealing with, okay, where did that come from? Why am I thinking that way? I think when we individually start dealing with our own stuff, then hopefully we can get there quicker as a community.
Have you seen some change? Have you seen positive feedback?
I feel like I have. I think what frustrates a lot of organizers and activists is that we want it to be a sprint and it's a marathon. Sometimes it's a long relay race. But I see it when I have people say, I get that, or I'm going to try to do different in my business, or I'm going to make different choices with my kids. When I see people have those level of realizations, then I'm like, okay, we're moving in the right direction. When I have people that say, T. Marie, can you help me have this conversation with my child about it? I've had a friend that say, hey, I don't think I'm the right person to take my kid through the Civil Rights Institute. Will you take them through there?
Wow.
Absolutely. Let's do it. You know, and I let them ask all the questions they want to ask. And, you know, actually, that's not factual. Actually, this is what happened. You know, to me, that's community. If I say you're my friend and, you know, you just so happen to be white, your children should know me just as well as you know me. You know, we should be interacting on that level. We think about it in sometimes in the instance of gender, where you may have a mother who has a son and you have a good guy friend. And it's like, you know, could you take him out and talk to him and have that hard conversations, and vice versa if it's a guy that has custody of his daughter, you know, and it's a good friend that's a female. And I think we have to have those conversations where we can say, you know what? Mommy is not the best one to have that conversation with you, but, you know, so-and-so is going to come hang out with us and we're going to talk. And not to put the pressure on people, but I think when you do have people in your life that's saying, I'm willing to be that, I'm willing to have that conversation, or give you pointers on how to have that conversation. I have friends who are white who have adopted Black children. And I'm honest with them. I'm like, okay, there's some conversations that you aren't going to be able to have with them. You know, and how many people of color are they interacting with on a regular basis? You got to make sure they're getting a very, you know, harmonious and healthy interaction, so they're not questioning who they are in 15, 16 years. You know, but I'm not afraid to have that conversation, you know, even down to, okay, let's talk about what you're doing with this baby hair. Let's have a hair conversation, you know, so you understand. Or having a friend, I had a friend who adopted, I think she was fostering a young Black man. And I said, have you had the police conversation? And she was like, huh? I said, let me help you. You know, and I sent her some things and everything. And I said, if you want me to sit in with you on this conversation, cool. If you think you got enough material to have this conversation honestly, then cool. But to me, that's community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're a part of my extended family. However I can help, I want to help. I see it a lot of times when I go on college campuses. The fact that they're willing to show up, you know, on a hard topic. And sometimes it could be because the teacher, you know, promised bonus, you know, bonus credit. But the fact that you're there, you know, you can't unhear what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. You know, and I try to, in some type of way, incorporate either music or something familiar that next time you hear that, you're going to think about what I said. I try to be real strategic in saying, okay, I'm going to play this song. And you may think it's just being played because we're not ready to start. But I'm being very strategic and making sure it plays long enough for you to hear exactly what I want you to hear. And I have students email me and say, you know, when you said that, that really got me to thinking about this, and this is what I want to do on my campus, and I'm going to take this back home. To me, I know it's seeping in. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's marathon work, but it's working. Yeah.
Thank you for doing it.
Wow. I appreciate it.
I wonder if you could leave me with an assignment for working on my bias, especially as someone that I'm sure fancies myself like far along the path. I know there's work to be done. So,
I think my charge would be, one, definitely looking at your circle and mm-hmm. see who's missing. And seeing how you can build those relationships. It may not be racially, it may be faith-wise, it may be gender, but, you know, do you have somebody in any community that if something was going on that you wanted to be supportive of, or that I'm just looking for more information that you can go to. So I would say evaluate your circle and see who's missing and try to truly build relationships around that. But then I would also say I'm a fan of each one, teach one. And if it's something that you get, that you catch, that's good stuff, share that with somebody else. Whether that's, I saw this film, yeah, it's hard to watch, but I think you need to check this out. It may help you understand more of what teenage girls are dealing with in their schools. You know, it may help you understand suicide better. It may help you understand what, you know, Hispanic people in this country are dealing with, and sharing that information. Those would be my two. And lastly, if you can do something, identify what that is and get to work.
Thank you. Where can people find you?
Oh my goodness. So I'm the worst. I do not have a website, but I am on social media. So I'm on Facebook, T. Marie King. I'm on Instagram, and I think my Instagram is TMKing79. Let's quickly check to be sure. But those are the easiest ways to get me, because I actually do respond to my
Which
to my
is
messages.
Amazing considering how much is on your plate.
Sometimes it might be late at night. That doesn't mean you have to respond back that late. But I just so happen to be up. But yes, Instagram, TMKing79, and on Facebook, T. Marie King.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Really
Thank you for having
your time.
me. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here, sweet people. It's really my favorite thing to do in life all time, to share these teachers with you. So thank you for listening. If you want to find me, I am also on the internet, maurajames.com, Maura James on Instagram. And next week, I am releasing a trailer with a crowdfunding campaign to finish the documentary that I've been making about the mass reintegration crisis that is facing our community. It's about a group of guys that Daniel and I met in Georgia who have just gotten out of prison after serving like 20, 30, 40 years in prison. They're older now, in their 60s to 80s, and a lot of them haven't been out in the world since they were maybe 20 years old. They don't know how to use smartphones. They don't have jobs, and it's really shocking and disturbing how little support they have, period. Their childhoods were traumatic, prison was traumatic, and they've never had any kind of counseling or rehabilitation, and now they're free, but they've been ejected out into the world to basically defend for themselves. And the film is really just a meditation on what that life looks like. We just hung out with these guys for about 6 weeks. It's been a huge learning process for me as a human being and as a filmmaker, doing things that I've never done before, which is the best way to learn and also the scariest. So I'm really excited to share it with you soon. If you go to my website, there's a place where you can put in your email if you want updates about that, but that'll be coming out on Monday. All right, I want to leave you with Zoe Leonard's manifesto of a poem, I Want a President. This was written in 1992. I'm sure many of you have read it, and I felt like it warranted a full read. So this is a call to all you lovers out there to be the leader. We need you. Here's Zoe Leonard. I want a dyke for president. I want a person with AIDS for president, and I want a fag for vice president. And I want someone with no health insurance, and I want someone who grew up in a place where the earth is so saturated with toxic waste that they didn't have a choice about getting leukemia. I want a president that had an abortion at 16. And I want a candidate who isn't the lesser of two evils. And I want a president who lost their last lover to AIDS, who still sees that in their eyes every time they lay down to rest, who held their lover in their arms and knew they were dying. I want a president with no air conditioning, a president who has stood online at the clinic, at the DMV, at the welfare office, and has been unemployed and laid off and sexually harassed and gay-bashed and deported. I want someone who spent the night in the tombs and had a cross burned on their lawn and survived rape. I want someone who's been in love and been hurt, who respects sex, who has made mistakes and learned from them. I want a black woman for president. I want someone with bad teeth, someone who's eaten hospital food, someone who cross-dresses and has done drugs and been in therapy. I want someone who's committed civil disobedience, and I want to know why this isn't possible. I want to know why we started learning, somewhere down the line, that a president is always a clown, always a John and never a hooker, always a boss and never a worker, always a liar, always a thief, and never caught. Fuck yeah. Go out there in the world, light some things on fire, burn really bright. It's okay. It's the time. I love you. More soon.